I'm Gavin McPherson from Oasis TV, and today I'd like to talk to you about premium property. Now, I know this topic is not for everyone, but I'd like to think for many of you viewers out there that if you're not buying a premium property now or soon, I'd like to think you'll be buying one into the near future. In any event, some of the rules that apply to premium property purchases still apply to generic purchasing anyway. Now, one of the first rules of utmost importance is to consider your budget. Now, it's one thing that with some of the lower end properties, you get so many people in the property at one time, you don't get a lot of communication with the agents. It's totally different at the other end. But that leads you down to the path of getting a lot of interface with an agent. And it does leave you with one big problem, which is a very loaded question: how much money do you have? And let me say now, once you open your mouth and say those words, trust me, around the traps, especially in some of these small communities, especially in Sydney, Brisbane, Melbourne, people know each other and every agent speaks to every other agent. They will know how much money you've got for your budget now and going forward. So with that loaded question, it's a good thing to ignore it and to potentially address that by suggesting to the agent that you do have a general range, and that would depend on the type of property and the work required to do to that property. And also, it's also something to keep in your back pocket to suggest that, look, we're just getting consideration done on the finance at this present time. Now, one of the most important things to remember about premium property is that in that market there is a huge tendency towards off-market properties. And I'm not just talking 5 to 10% or 15% of that market in opportunities, I'm talking over 50 to 60%. And I can only certainly say from my position at this point in time, and we're talking in June 2014, certainly over the last 12 to 18 months, every single property we've bought in the premium band has been off-market. So my advice for those people that might have their property on the market now in the premium band and then are looking forward to buying back into the premium market in the next 12 to 18 months, my advice is to get started now. And don't say to yourself, I'll wait till one window closes, that's the one property sold, before I jump out and look at another one. I'd suggest you do two at the same time. It doesn't mean you have to intensively look, it just means you have to start, because there isn't that much stock anyway. But what's important is you will find that a lot of the stock recycles itself. It's one thing you will notice in these areas which have a preponderance of premium property is that the buyers there, and certainly the sellers, like absolute discretion. And you usually only ever find property goes on the market, and when it does go on the market, it goes with a concerted campaign for 4 to 6 weeks. If it doesn't sell after that period, you will very likely find that that property is withdrawn from the market, and then eligible suitors can be taken through afterwards over an extended period of time once they've already captured their imagination in that period of time. But they don't like to leave premium property on the market for an extended period of time. Now, my next rule of thumb is to make sure we set the bar a little bit higher. Okay? Now, that's not to suggest that you would otherwise we go into these purchasing property thinking that they're only 2 or 3 year transactions. They are not. But we certainly want to give it a higher level of thinking when we consider that, for instance, a recent purchase we did for a client at $6.5 million paid an absolute fortune in their stamp duty. And that would be specifically $395,490 just on stamp duty. And that amount in itself can go and buy a cheap property in its own right. So just remembering that that stamp duty figure we were just talking about, that resembles almost 5% of the purchase price. Now that's really important, being such a huge figure. Now it also ties into my general rule, which doesn't just apply for premium property, is we try and buy always 5 to 10% under market value. That rule for me never changes as a buyer's agent. So my point is, if we can capture that and apply that rule to your premium property, 5 to 10% purchase under value, well then certainly you've taken care of stamp duty, and then obviously because it's such a huge amount of money, you've also catered for some worst case scenarios. And let me tell you, when we consider that off-market transactions and the amount of property that there is on the market that you don't know about, trust me, there's a lot more value than you think there is in that premium market sector, and certainly right at this point in time. Okay, now at this present point in time, which is June 2014, it's absolutely certain that the market has come back a little bit. And I've found that if I had to pick a little window of opportunity where I found that started, it was around about when the budget leak started in April, tending towards that May. Now, up to May, and certainly the budget, we found that almost every single property in Sydney, in the premium market sphere, and I'm talking it certainly above 60%, has passed in, or they've changed their campaign. So not all of those figures get recorded. If they change their campaign to expressions of interest, that just falls by the wayside and is then therefore called a private treaty campaign. But that's important, and you should be looking at that and following that as a strategy to see how you might be able to get better value going forward. Now what I mean by that is most people, I think you'd have to have your head buried in the sand if you didn't notice over the next couple of years that property has certainly spiked up, and low interest rates have certainly been the reason for that. But that property increase that we experienced still did tend into the premium market, but certainly not as much. But upticks of 15% were certainly achieved. But I think what's happened at the moment, those properties that we found that start to get listed in the premium market sector from January and February onwards seem to have another little 10% on top of that. And I don't think that was warranted. So my point is, I think that they're in quite a stable market right now if they didn't try and be so greedy. So your job is actually to have a look at some of those properties that perhaps can be picked on that potentially are overcooking the campaign, which is what we call in the industry. So that's going for a little bit more money than they really should. And then cheekily, afterwards, we can come back 6 to 8 weeks later, sometimes even months later, and pick that up for potentially 10 to 15% below actual market value. So for something, for argument's sake, that was worth $5 million, they tried to list that for, say, $6 million, and they didn't succeed. Okay? My ambition and your ambition should be to look at that and track that campaign, and others like it. Remember, have a lot more up your sleeve to track that campaign, and over a period of time, we might just be able to pick that in the low fives or even $5 million. Now that's a good 10% under market value if we determine that it actually was worth 5.5 to start with. Now let's remember, in these patches of dirt, which are so valuable to a lot of property purchasers, let's talk the eastern suburbs of Sydney, say Mossman, Balmoral, in the North Shore of Sydney. These areas really only have a few select agents, and I'd say certainly less than 10 agents that have the esteem to certainly carry off premium purchases. And let's call premium, north of 5 million, and so sub-premium between, say, 3 and 5 million. My point being is, all these agents knowing each other, it's very, very likely that almost all of these agents went and pitched for the business on most of the properties. So you can have a lot of success by ringing some of the agents and asking them about properties that they do not have the listings for, but they might have pitched for the business. They can often tell you they might be a disgruntled agent from a property that they tried to sell 18 months to 2 years ago. Now, whilst they shouldn't do that, every now and then you do get an agent that might let you know a little bit more than they should and give you an indication there might be an opportunity for a bargain, and certainly even give you a hint that you might wait a little bit longer and they might be getting a listing soon, which is actually one particular property we're looking at this point in time where we know already the agent who's got the property is about to lose it. Now, isn't it great to have some information at hand, knowing which might determine the outcome for you in the near future? Now, for most of you that already know me, you would understand that I probably come from a very conservative base. Now, that's true. And so I subscribe to the theory that if you don't get the right property for the right price, you should walk away because there will always be another one. Now, strangely, even though premium property in the $5 and certainly $10 million and upward genre tend to be unique, that doesn't change my opinion at all from that mindset that if you don't find the right one for the right price, there's still another one. And the reason I say that is because in the premium property, and for any property that matter, but with a premium budget, you've got so much ability to afford these little nuances like views, expansive views, those with big yards, those with small yards, and certainly the busy professional now does prefer a smaller, low maintenance garden. Big car accommodation, tennis courts, swimming pools, size of the house and certainly size of the bedrooms. The main point I make is because of those robust budgets, $5 and certainly $10 million and up budgets, you do have the budget to accommodate these little nuances all in one big package. So the main point I say is there's a lot of ways to make yourself happy. Okay, and one, yes, it might have one less car in one, but it might have an extra tennis court. One might have one less bedroom, but might have the extra study that you're after. So in any event, I still subscribe to the theory that even though property is unique in the premium property sphere, there will always be another one. And from my experience of doing this over 10 years, I have never found a client, and certainly never found a client in the premium market that is not happy with their end purchase, even after missing out on some of those properties and having tears at the end of it. They're happy at the end when they've found that other property. Okay, thanks for listening to me for another week on Oasis TV. Now, for you premium property purchasers out there, I'm sure you've found a few good tips out there, and tips that I would argue you can absolutely carry out yourself. But for those that think they need a little bit of help, don't forget that buyer's agents are at their best in the premium market sector when they're looking at off-market properties. So if you'd like to contact us, don't hesitate to contact us at oasisproperty.com.au.